Alright guys, welcome back to the roughness portion of the tread floor tutorial. Let's hop right into it. Alright, so in the last one we finished our base color. Now we're moving on to our roughness. Let's move this guy out of the way here and spawn in a new uniform color. Let's plug this in and make sure you're set to grayscale, not color, because we're going to be feeding grayscale information into this roughness. Alright, that should make your material super glossy. That's alright. Let's move this guy all the way to the left here. Alright, and let's get started. So we're going to pull from our uniform color. And actually we're going to make a connector here. And then from here we're going to do a blend. Let's set this initial uniform color to 0.4. Like so. So this is going to be our base roughness for like our paint, not the metal. We'll set that a little later. So let's pull this guy out a little bit. And then we're going to be pulling from the treads from this guy. So let's drag out and do a levels. And then let's do another uniform color. Change it to grayscale and make it all the way white or 1. Plug that into the top. And then for this blend mode, we're going to do subtract. Right now, what's happening is well, let's set this to subtract. Okay. So we have our base paint color here, and then we are going to subtract this mask from it so that we can change the value of the treads. We're not gonna use the slider in the blend for this. We're gonna use the levels as we normally do, and we're gonna leave everything the same except for the last option here. We're gonna do 0.075, and that's because we want them to be slightly glossier or slightly less rough than the paint, because people have been walking over it and basically cleaning it every time they go over it with their shoes or whatever. Alright, then we're going to do another blend. We're going to move on down a little bit. Sorry, I turned my mic on. We're going to be pulling from the sockets that we did first before we put the plates or the buttons on top. So we're going to pull from here into our levels. And I'm just going to copy this guy, paste them over here. And for this levels, we're also going to do subtract. And for the levels, sorry, not subtract, copy. I was looking at this guy down here. So leave this blend to copy, and we're going to change this guy down here. And we're going to do 0.35. Because again, the thinking here is that this stuff below these plates, it's rougher because it's been covered and there's going to be stuff sitting on top, so it's almost like as if dirt is accumulating there. So I want that to be a little rougher than these flat exposed areas. Alright. Then after this, we're going to do another blend. This blend's going to be set to subtract again. And then we are going to pull from the diamond plates. So yeah, from right here. We're going to pull into a histogram scan. And then from the scan into a blur. Blur high quality grayscale into a levels. And plug that into the bottom. And then for the histogram scan, we're going to do 0.268 and 1. For the blur, we're going to do 0.38 and 1. We'll just see what's happening here. Blurring it a little bit. And then for the levels, we're going to do 0.11 on the level out. And then we need one of these guys again. Alright. So what's happening here is now the plate, so this middle guy, because it's covering the socket, I made it a little glossier or less rough. And we had to drive it through a scan because if you guys remember, we had to do this for the base color as well. Here, because the diamond shape is actually bigger um, than the socket, and we had to adjust with the scan because we were using a what is it? A max lighten. Okay. So let's dock all these. So I'm just gonna hit D, D, and D, and we're gonna do another blend. Copy this guy. Like that. And then we need a blur and a levels. And then we are going to plug in the remainder of the plates. So these guys here. So let's move this along. And then these guys before the levels, as usual. Plug that in here. For the blur, we're going to do 0.25. And 1. So before, after. And then for our levels, we're going to do 0.115. So 0.115. And then for the blend mode, we're going to subtract again. So you can see here that because we did the sockets first, and then we're putting the plate on top, we have this contrast here where, let me go top down here, where like over here is rougher than the plate itself. So that gives you some really nice contrast. and some good roughness. Okay, moving on down the line, another blend. Copy paste this guy, like so. We'll need our trusty levels. And then for this guy, oh, our bolts. So from the tile generator, we're gonna pull. I like to, if you guys have seen my previous tutorials, I like to match these up. Or at least I tried to. You guys should definitely take the time, because it makes it easy to track, because everything kind of is in line this way. So this is the height of where the bolts was added. This is the roughness of the bolts, and then this is the coloring of the bolts. Now, not every graph is going to end up looking nicely like this. Sometimes you have to, go all over the place, but it's a good habit to start with. All right, so for this blend mode, we're going to do subtract again. And then for the levels, we're going to do 0.115, like so. Again, similar thinking as the treads, where it's going to be a little glossier. From being the highest point on the height map. Now here is going to be a little bit different. Let's get our two uniform color and our levels. Whoops. That's going to be a little different here because we're actually going to be driving some information into our roughness that isn't from the height. Because there's some stuff that's only on the color channel. And so we have to pull from the base color this time. And we're pulling from the this dirtiness that's coming from this white noise that we created here. So as usual, we're going to pull from before the levels. And then I'm going to guess, and we're going to have to do a copy. And we are going to do 0.3 on the level out. So let's change this to... Oh yeah, we copied from the previous one. That's why it already has a value in there. So you can see here before. And now that we're using this noise to drive this portion of the roughness, we get this. So if we zoom out here, and we hide this by pressing Shift D, before, after. Yeah, I encourage you guys to play with the values in your levels here if you want to be super rough, or maybe not as glossy. Feel free to play with that. Okay, now for this next one, this is where we're going to add our metallic roughness value. So this is a big one, because right now our metal and our paint is sharing the same roughness value. Oops. Okay. So we are going to pull from, if you guys remember, we have these two, which is the large paint peels. This is the smaller island peels, and then we add them together. And then we went forward here on our height, and this is where we added the paint chipping on the edges. As you can see here. So then we added, our islands, and then we added our corner blending, and then we're going to pull from this blur to plug into our levels here for our roughness. So you can already see that this stuff here, or anywhere where there's metal, like here and here, not there. Here, it's already super rough, because if you see on our 2D, white is 1, and we're using the roughness workflow, so 1 is rough and 0 is glossy. So let's go to our, let me find it, where'd it go? Yeah, here. We're going to use subtract for our blend mode. And now you see that it's the opposite. So now it almost looks like there's a puddle of water there. Obviously we don't want it to be that strong. So let's go to our level settings. And let's do 0.3. Now, it doesn't look too good right now because it's just, it's either paint or not paint. And obviously we have this like grunge and stuff on top, so we're going to be layering more on that, and we'll get some more interesting contrast than just like a wet or sort of wet metal surface there. So let's do another blend. Copy paste our uniform. Okay, let's get our levels in. Now for this part, we are also going to pull, actually no, we're going to pull from a ambient occlusion that we created. I think it's this guy. So we're going to pull from this guy, and we're going to not plug it into the levels right away. We're going to plug it into an invert grayscale first. Whoops. And then from the invert, we're going to do a histogram scan, and then plug that into the levels. And then for the scan, we're going to do 0.1. And just to show you what's happening here. So we have this ambient occlusion, which just uses our height map, because that's where it's coming from. It's coming from here. And it's giving us, ambient occlusion based on that height map. And then we're inverting it. So then we get these white, the white is what we want. So now you can see here we're getting some white values here in the crevices. On the lowest, the lower the point in the in our height, the more shadowing there is. So we're basically using shadow to guide our roughness here. And then I set the position on the scan to be, on the lower side. By default, this should be set to 0.5, or it's actually set to 0 by default. But if you want to have a good starting point, start with 0.5, because that will give you whatever you plug into it. So if we double click the invert grayscale, this is what it looks like. And then when we hit the scan, it looks the same. That's because it's set to 0.5. When you spawn the histogram scan, it's always at 0. So just to give yourself a good starting point, just change it to 0.5 and then mess with it. So we want to use 0.1 because we don't want all of this. We just want to focus right now on the crevices, like this. And then we're gonna change our blend here to add linear dodge. And you can see here that it made everything rougher in those crevices, just like our map dictated here. But I think this is a little too much, so we're going to go to our levels, and we're going to drop it down to 0.3. And it's all about subtle detail and subtle differences. So let's see what we did here. So you can see some of it right here. Alright, let's keep moving. Alright. Let's bring in our levels and our uniform as usual. Okay. And then for this level, we're gonna pull from some base color stuff. So let's go to where we can find our grunge scratches. So over here, we are going to pull from this blend here. Now it's important to pull from this one because this is where we did the subtracting. If you guys recall, we subtracted the paint mask from the scratches because we wanted the scratches to only be on the metal surface. So that's what this subtract here is doing. Otherwise we'd have scratches all over. So we're going to pull from this to make sure that every time we increase the peeling, that we get the right mask. And we're going to plug that into the levels. Because now we're going to do our scratches, our roughness on our scratches. Leave the blend to copy, go to your levels, and we're going to do 0.85 on the level out. So now if we look closely, the roughness, the scratch roughness is only on the metal. So you can see it that it's already making that wet puddle from before look more interesting because now we're adding more roughness on it. Okay, let's keep moving. Same thing, grab these two. Hold Alt and click to get rid of the connecting there. We're going to change our blend to add. And then for this guy, we are going to pull from this guy, I believe. Yes, because now we want to take, if you guys remember, in our base color, we have this. I'm going to hide this so you guys see the difference. So this is before this node. This is where we added some shadowing in between the treads. So now we want to take this information and layer it on top. So whoops, I'll do that. Pull from that guy into your levels. And now if I hide this node, this is what it was before, after. So now like where all this dirt, where this darker green is now rougher. So if I hide it, this is what it was before and now. Because that's where a lot of the dirt is going to concentrate. And then for this levels setting, just hit the auto levels button, which is between the invert grayscale and the values. Just hit that, and that'll do your top line for you. And that might vary with mine, but just make sure you're hitting auto levels. And then the only one you really have to worry about is the last one as usual. And we're going to do 0.45. So before, after. So you can see that it's less rough on the edges and then more rough in the center, which is really cool. Okay. Next, we're going to add some more grunge, some more dirtiness. So let's do a blend, Let's do our levels. Let's copy paste this guy. And then we're going to plug in this guy here. This is where we did our triple layering of dirtiness and just kind of grunge and overall just like dirt on top. So we're going to pull from this guy. For the blend mode, we're going to do copy, and then for the levels, we're going to do 0.75. So now let's see what it looked like before and after. You can see the difference. See, so we get all these sorts of contrasts because we did the triple layering where it's like fainter here. So this is like our low, this is like our stronger, medium, and then we have like our high, and that's like our spots and stuff. So then when we look over here, instead of this looking flat like it was before, and now we turn it on, you can see that some of these roughness have like steps to them. Where like the spots are the roughest, then we have our like our medium and then our low points, which creates a more visually noticeable contrast between our roughness values. Okay. Let me just double check that it's set the copy. Yep. Okay. Let's move along. I think we're almost done for the roughness. That's nice. Let's get our usual suspects. Let's make sure we unplug this. And then for this part, we're going to create a standalone noise that is not going to show up in the base color or in the height. So let's start with a grunge map 007. So this guy here. And let me look at the settings. Yeah, everything can stay the same. We're going to pull from him. Do our usual vector warp grayscale. And then we're going to pull from... to this guy? Yeah, from this guy. Which is this color guy, where these plates all share the same one. Then we're going to pull from there into a blend. And then we are going to need a invert grayscale. And this is going to plug into the top of the blend. And then we need to go back and pull from this guy, I believe. Yeah, this guy gets all the action. So this is after our small islands, big island, and edge peeling masks. And that should not have gone in there. It should have gone in here. And then this blend is going to be changed to subtract. Because what we're doing here, similar to what we did with our base color. So this is what it was before, right? And this would have just gone and splattered all over our tiles. We don't want that. I want this noise that we're working on here to just be on the metal. So we're bringing our mask, and this is right now. This is the paint layer. The white is paint. Before it was the metal, excluding the paint, but we inverted it, and now it's the paint, and we're excluding the metal because we want to subtract the paint from this noise. So the only thing that the noise only appears on the metal. So then we can plug that in. And then we're going to change our levels to 0.2. Oops, 0.2. So this is what really gives it a nice breakup on the metal, so it doesn't look like still water. We know see, like right there, it looks kind of uniform in roughness, and then boom. Now there's some more variety. And then our final layer of roughness variety is going to be very simple actually. So let's copy our guy here. Let's do our, oops, not this guy. Levels. And then for this guy, we are going to pull from this guy. This is when we added the dirt to accumulate on the edges of the paint peeling. So on the edge you see it's darker. So we're trying to pull that information. And then this blend is set to copy. And then the levels is set to 0.6. 0.6 here, and then go back to your histogram, and then hit the auto levels for these three settings. So let's see what that did. So like I said, this levels here is coming from the darkening that we did of the edges. So if you look at this now, you see that the roughness kind of extends all the way to the edge, but with our edging that we did earlier. That sounded funny. And we bring it back, you can see here that now the edges here are rougher. Which gives it a nice like transition between the metal and the paint. And you would expect, where you have like this dent basically of the paint peeling, you get some dirt accumulating there. And as usual, there's one more thing in roughness actually. But let's go back over here to our paint peeling and let's just play around with our position, which is our peel amount. So because it's all procedural, then all of this stuff that we're doing will carry over and it will adjust based on our previous settings because we're subtracting and keeping track of all of our pulling from the right places. So if we look over here, and then if we go back, I think it was 0.4. That's what we had before. Alrighty. Alrighty. And now for our final blend. For this one, I just added one last layer of roughness to make it a little bit more interesting because I felt like it was missing. Oops, this should be in levels. Like it was missing just a little bit of contrast because right now, it's kind of interesting on the edges where there's like metal and where there's paint and where there's like crevices, but like over here in the center, it's kind of rough. It's kind of boring. It's kind of flat in roughness value. So I wanted to add some wet spots to kind of give it some nice juicy contrast. So for this bit, we're actually going to change this uniform color to black. And we are going to spawn in a grunge spots dirty. And this is going to go into a scan. And then a levels. And then below it, we're going to do a grunge spots into a levels. And then into a blend. And then this is going to go on top. So let's start from the top, from this grunge spots 30. I'm going to turn up the contrast to 0.25. Leave coverage and scale the same. In the histogram scan, we're going to do 0.15 and 0.48. And what I'm doing here is I'm lowering the amount coming through. So this is before and after. The levels, we're going to do 0.38. And then for the spots, we're going to leave, actually we're going to do 0.33 on details. Because that's going to give us more like little details here. So 0.33. And then the contrast by default is set to max, which makes everything white. So if we lower this, we basically bring in some of the different values. So we're going to do 0.5. And then for our blend, we're going to do add. Like so. And then for this levels from the grunge shots we forgot, we're going to do 0.225. Like so. Plug that into our levels. Before we do that, let's do a vector warp grayscale again, because we want to move around our new noise here. So let's pull from the same guy we pulled from last. So this guy. And then let's change our vector warp scale to 5. I think I have to change this one to 5 as well. That's where this stuff was happening. Okay. And then this is going to stay a copy. So now if we look here, what we did is we basically added some wet spots. So like this guy here, this guy here. So I'm going to hide on hide. And actually, I'm going to go back to the levels, and I'm just going to hit auto levels to bring in more of that like those wet spots up. Okay, and then as usual, this is just something I like to do. I'm going to throw in a little sharpen here. Let's see the difference that it makes. So actually going to turn this down to like 0.5. Okay. And the last thing is the metallic. So I'm going to make that a separate video, and that one should be a lot shorter. So that's it for the roughness. I'll see you guys in the next one.